In the quiet village of Lumbala, the morning sun painted the clay huts golden. Birds chirped softly, and the wind rustled through the leaves of tall trees that lined the narrow paths. Smoke rose from small cooking fires as mothers prepared breakfast for their families. The village felt peaceful, as if time itself slowed down to watch the small daily routines of its people. But not everyone in Lumbala felt at peace. Young Saad stepped out of her little hut, carrying a small basket in her hands. Her grandmother had asked her to find fresh herbs from the forest, herbs that could ease her persistent cough and aching joints. Saad loved her grandmother more than anything in the world. Her grandmother had raised her after her parents had gone to a faraway city, seeking work they never returned from. Saad remembered their faces faintly, and each time she thought of them, a gentle sadness filled her heart. But she pushed the thought away and focused on the task at hand. The forest was not far from the village, but its edge was thick with tall grass and strange shadows. The villagers rarely went deep inside because old stories told of spirits that roamed the woods at night. Saad, however, was not afraid. She had grown up hearing the stories, and though they made her pause sometimes, she had always felt that the forest was her friend. She knew the plants, the sounds of birds, and the paths where the sunlight fell through the trees in beautiful patterns. Today she needed herbs, and she walked carefully among the bushes, looking for the small green leaves that her grandmother loved. Some villagers had already begun to whisper about Saad. She did not hear them, of course, but the rumors had been spreading for months. The first incident was when a goat fell sick unexpectedly, though Saad had nothing to do with it. Then, during a sudden storm, the crops in one field were destroyed. Some villagers, frightened and looking for someone to blame, murmured that Saada's presence always seemed to bring trouble. "Cursed child," they whispered, "she brings misfortune wherever she goes." Saad, lost in thought, did not notice the soft eyes watching her from the path. A few children peeked from behind a hut, curious yet afraid. They wanted to play with Saad, but they had been warned by their parents to stay away. Fear can travel fast in a village like Lumbala, faster than truth or kindness. Still, Saada's smile never faded. She was kind to everyone she met and spoke to animals as if they could understand her. Even the birds seemed to gather near her when she hummed a soft tune. As she moved deeper into the forest, Saad reached a small clearing where sunlight fell like a golden carpet. She knelt on the soft earth and began to pull herbs carefully, placing them in her basket. The scent of the green leaves mixed with the earthy smell of soil and moss. She breathed in deeply, feeling a strange calmness. Sometimes she imagined that the forest whispered back to her, telling her secrets only she could understand. Today it felt protective, as if it was shielding her from the harsh words of the village. While Saad worked, she thought about her grandmother, who often told her stories of brave women in the village who had helped their people in times of trouble. Saad wanted to be like them, but all she had now was the basket of herbs. Still, she believed even small acts of kindness mattered. Each herb she picked, she thought, would help her grandmother feel better. Perhaps if her grandmother smiled today, it could heal something inside her as well. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes made her freeze. A small rabbit hopped across the clearing and Saad laughed quietly, relieved. She loved animals and often spoke to them softly, telling them secrets she would tell no one else. Her voice was gentle and soothing, and the rabbit stopped for a moment as if listening, before hopping away into the deeper forest. Saad shook her head and smiled, thinking, "Even the animals like me here." Time passed quickly. The sun climbed higher in the sky and the clearing became warmer. Saad filled her basket with the last herbs and prepared to return home. As she walked back, she noticed something strange, a few villagers standing near the edge of the forest watching her silently. She slowed her steps, unsure if they had followed her. Their eyes were cold, filled with suspicion. They said nothing, only stared. Saad did not understand. She had never hurt anyone. She had never caused trouble. Why did they look at her like that? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of children laughing in the distance. She recognized Zola and Kemi, two girls from the village, playing near the path. They waved at her, but when they noticed the stern faces of the watching villagers, they quickly turned away. Saad felt a pang of sadness. Even friends seemed afraid of being associated with her. She whispered to herself, "If only they knew." The walk back to her hut was quiet. Saad kept her head down, thinking about the herbs and her grandmother's smile. But behind her, the whispers of the villagers grew louder. They spoke of curses, misfortune, and the strange happenings in the village. Their fear made them blind, unable to see the truth. And Saad, unaware of their plotting, carried on, innocent and kind, believing that one day, they would see her for who she truly was. By the time she reached her hut, the sun was high, casting long shadows across the dusty path. Saad placed the basket of herbs on the wooden table and looked at her grandmother, who smiled weakly from her chair. "You are always so thoughtful, my dear," her grandmother said, reaching out to touch Saada's hand. Saad felt a warmth in her chest and nodded. She knew that love was stronger than fear, at least inside this small home. Outside, the village moved on with its day, but the whispers continued, carried by the wind from hut to hut. Fear is a seed that grows quickly, and in Lumbala, it had already started to take root. Saad, however, remained unaware. She tended to her grandmother, humming softly, brushing the hair from her eyes, and preparing the herbs for the tea. She thought about nothing but healing, kindness, and the simple joys of life. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of orange and pink. The forest seemed to glow softly in the fading light. Saad stepped outside for a moment, looking at the tall trees and the winding paths that led deep into the unknown. She felt a connection to everything around her, the earth, the animals, and even the wind itself. It was as if the forest whispered encouragement, telling her to stay strong, no matter what the villagers thought. That night, Saad sat near the fire with her grandmother. The village was quiet now, but the air was thick with fear and suspicion. Saad did not know that tomorrow, those fears would grow louder, and her life would change in ways she could never imagine. For now, though, she felt safe. She felt the warmth of her grandmother's hand, the soft crackle of the fire, and the calmness of the forest that seemed to watch over her. Saada's innocence and kindness shone brightly, like a small lamp in the dark. She had no idea of the storm that would soon reach her doorstep, nor did she know that the villagers' fear would push them toward an unthinkable decision. But for this one peaceful moment, she lived in harmony with the world, and the forest whispered softly, as if promising that her story was only beginning. That evening, the village of Lumbala grew quiet as the sun sank behind the tall trees. Shadows stretched long across the dusty square where the villagers often gathered for meetings, festivals, and announcements. Tonight, however, the square was not filled with laughter or chatter. It was filled with fear. The air seemed heavy, thick with whispers that had traveled from hut to hut all day. Everyone in the village knew why the elders had called this unusual meeting, and tension was written on every face. At the center of the square stood Bayo, the village elder, a tall man with broad shoulders and a face lined with years of authority. His voice, which often carried wisdom, now thundered with anger. "It is time," he shouted. The villagers fell silent, staring at him with nervous eyes. Some shuffled their feet, others clasped their hands tightly as if trying to hide their fear. Bayo pointed toward the path leading from the forest. "It is Sada's fault," he shouted again, his booming voice echoing through the square. "She brings misfortune to our village." The words hit the air like stones thrown into a quiet pond. A few villagers gasped. Some looked at each other uncertainly while others murmured in agreement. Saad stood at the edge of the square, her basket of herbs now resting by her side. Her eyes widened in shock and confusion. She had spent the morning helping her grandmother, tending to the sick goats and collecting herbs. She had done nothing to harm anyone. How could they think she had caused these misfortunes? She opened her mouth to speak, but the crowd's murmurs grew louder. The voices of fear were stronger than the voice of reason. Zola, Sada's childhood friend, stepped forward. Her small hands trembled, but her voice rang out with courage. "Bayo, please." "You are wrong," she said, her eyes wide as she looked at the elder. "Saad has done nothing to anyone. She is kind and she works hard. The storms, the sick goats, those things happen naturally. You cannot blame her." But the villagers were not ready to listen. Fear had taken root in their hearts, and superstition had clouded their minds. The murmurs turned to shouts, voices overlapping and growing louder. "It's her. She is cursed. We must protect ourselves." The words crashed over Saad like a wave. Even Zola's brave voice seemed to vanish into the chaos. Bayo's face grew red with anger. "Enough," he barked, pounding his fist against the wooden post that supported the meeting area. "The spirits are angry and we cannot ignore the signs. Every misfortune that has befallen our village started after Saad appeared in the forest. She must be punished to save us." The villagers nodded, fear still gleaming in their eyes. Saad felt her heart tighten. She wanted to speak, to explain, to make them understand, but the fear in the villagers' eyes made her words feel small and powerless. She looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would stand with her, but the people she had known since childhood now looked at her with suspicion. Their faces were hard, their eyes cold. Even some who had smiled at her before now turned away. The air was tense and heavy. Small children hid behind their mothers, peeking out with wide eyes. Even the animals seemed to sense the fear, skittering nervously in the corners of the square. Saad tried to calm herself to find a rational thought, but her mind swirled with confusion. Why were they doing this? She had never caused harm. She had always helped. Bayo stepped closer, lowering his voice, though it was still strong enough for everyone to hear. Saad, do you deny the signs? He asked, his eyes narrowing. Do you deny that our crops failed, that our animals fell sick, that storms destroyed our fields? Can you deny it? Saad shook her head. I did not cause any of those things, she said softly, her voice trembling. I have only tried to help. I do not understand why you blame me. Her words were gentle, but they were drowned out by the crowd's rising anger. Some villagers began to shout again, voices laced with fear and anger. She is cursed, one man cried. We must act before the spirits strike again, another said. The panic was growing, spreading from person to person like a fire in dry grass. No one stopped to think, to question, or to consider the truth. Fear had blinded them. Zola tried again, her voice cracking. Please, you are making a mistake. Punishing her will not bring luck to the village. It will only hurt an innocent girl. She stepped closer to Saad, taking her hand. I will stand with you, she whispered, but her courage was fragile against the weight of the crowd. A few villagers looked unsure, glancing at their neighbors for guidance. Some wanted to speak, to defend Saad, but fear made them silent. The thought of going against Bayo and the elders was too strong. One by one, the voices of reason faded, leaving only the voices of panic and superstition. Bayo raised his hand, demanding silence. The council has decided, he said. His voice was steady now, cold and final. Saad must be punished for the safety of the village. The well has long been used for cleansing and protection. She will go there. Perhaps the spirits will forgive us if we act swiftly. The words hit Saad like a thunderbolt. Her eyes widened in horror. The well? She whispered, stepping back. You cannot. Please. I have done nothing. But the villagers moved as one, surrounding her. Their hands reached for her arms, their eyes hard. Saad struggled, but they were stronger, driven by fear rather than reason. Zola tried to pull her away, but one of the older men shoved her gently but firmly aside. Do not interfere, he said, his voice shaking with tension. It is for the good of all of us. Sada's heart pounded in her chest. Her mind raced, searching for a way to escape, a way to make them see the truth. She wanted to shout, to beg, to make them understand, but the crowd was too loud, too determined. The fear of the unknown had turned their hearts cold. She realized with a sinking feeling that no matter how much she tried, they would not listen. As they moved toward the well at the center of the village, Sada's eyes scanned the crowd. Faces she had known since childhood looked back at her, but they were strangers now, twisted by fear and superstition. Even some who had once smiled at her, who had shared games and laughter, now avoided her gaze. The betrayal stung, sharper than the rough hands holding her. The well loomed ahead, ancient and dark, its stones worn smooth by years of use. It had always been a place of mystery, but tonight, it seemed threatening. Shadows stretched across the circular opening, and the water inside reflected the dimming sky. Sada's stomach twisted as they pushed her closer. She looked up at the sky, hoping for a sign, for some help, but the sun had already set behind the trees. Zola's voice called out one last time. Please? Think about what you are doing, she cried, her hands trembling as she reached for Saad. You are making a terrible mistake. The crowd hesitated for a brief moment, a pause filled with uncertainty. But Bayo's voice cut through the silence, strong and commanding. Enough. There is no other way. The spirits demand this. It must be done now. Sada's mind raced. She tried to reason with them, to plead for her life, but the fear in the villagers' eyes was stronger than her words. The panic and superstition had built an invisible wall around them, and no truth could pass through. She felt herself being pulled closer to the edge of the well. Her feet slipped slightly on the worn stones, and she reached out for anything to hold on to. Zola grabbed her hand tightly. Don't let go, she shouted, but her strength was small against the crowd's determination. Sada's heart pounded, and for the first time, fear fully touched her. She realized that the villagers, blinded by superstition, would not see reason. They believed they were protecting themselves, even if it meant hurting someone innocent. The square seemed to close in around her. The villagers' voices blurred together, rising and falling like a storm. Sada's breathing grew fast and shallow. She tried to steady herself, to focus on the forest, on her grandmother, on anything that could give her courage. She whispered a small prayer, hoping for guidance, for some miracle that could save her. But the villagers did not stop. Fear had made them cruel and superstition had made them blind. Saad felt the ground shift beneath her as they edged her closer to the well. Her mind spun with thoughts of what might happen, and she realized that no one was coming to help. She and Zola were alone against the tide of panic and misunderstanding. The night grew darker. Torches flickered along the edges of the square, casting long shadows over the villagers' faces. The firelight reflected in Sada's wide eyes as she struggled to understand how people who once called her friend could now see her as a threat. She felt a mixture of fear, sadness, and disbelief. And in that moment, Saad knew that life in Lumbala would never be the same. The villagers' fear had turned into action, and she had no choice but to face whatever awaited her at the bottom of the well. Her heart trembled, but somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope remained. She did not yet know how, but she believed that one day the truth would come to light. The evening air in the village of Lumbala had grown heavy with fear. Shadows stretched long across the dusty paths, and the flickering torches cast an orange glow on the villagers' faces. Sada's heart pounded so loudly that she could almost hear it over the murmurs of the crowd. Every step toward the old well at the center of the village felt heavier than the last. The stones under her feet were rough and uneven, but she barely noticed. Her mind was full of fear and confusion. She could not understand why her own people, the neighbors who had shared smiles and games with her since childhood, were now dragging her toward danger. Saad stumbled slightly, and one of the villagers grabbed her arm to steady her. She felt the weight of their fear pressing down on her, like a heavy, invisible hand. "Please stop. I didn't do anything," she cried, her voice breaking. But the villagers only murmured among themselves. Their eyes darted nervously, some toward the dark forest beyond the village, as if expecting spirits to emerge at any moment. Others looked to Bayo, their elder, for confirmation that this action was right. Bayo's stern expression gave them courage, and they tightened their grip on Saad, pushing her forward. Zola ran beside Saad, holding her hand and trying to pull her free. "Saad, fight," she whispered urgently. "You are not cursed. They are wrong." But Zola's strength was small compared to the crowd. The villagers' panic had given them power over reason. The more Saad struggled, the tighter they held her. Every shout, every accusation, every fearful glance was a reminder that she was alone. Even familiar faces from her childhood seemed cold and hard, masked by fear. The old well came into view, its stone edges dark and damp. For as long as anyone could remember, the well had stood in the center of the village. It had been used to draw water, but over the years stories had grown around it. People said it had a spirit, a hidden magic that could punish wrongdoers or bless the faithful. Tonight, the villagers believed it was a place where they could rid themselves of a curse, or so they told themselves. Saad looked at it and shivered. It had always been ordinary to her, a place where she sometimes played as a child. Now it looked like a dark mouth waiting to swallow her whole. "Stand back," Bayo shouted, raising his hand. His voice was loud, commanding, and full of authority. The villagers stepped aside slightly, forming a circle around the well. Sada's heart raced faster. She tried to step back, but a strong pair of hands held her firmly. She looked around for help, for a friendly face, for anyone who might see reason, but there was none. Every eye that met hers was filled with fear or anger. The villagers truly believed she had brought misfortune to their homes, and that belief made them blind to the truth. Saad took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. "Please think. I'm not cursed. I have only ever helped," she cried, her voice trembling. Her words seemed small in the vast space of the square, drowned by the murmurs of fear. She could feel panic rising inside her, clawing at her chest like a living thing. Her mind raced, trying to imagine a way out, some escape she had not thought of before. But the circle of villagers closed tighter around her, leaving no room to move. Zola's hands were warm around Sada's. "Hold on to me," she whispered. "I won't let them take you without a fight." But Saad could feel the futility of it. No matter how brave Zola was, no one could stop the crowd once fear had taken hold. She looked at her friend and felt a rush of sorrow. This was not the way she had imagined her life. She had only wanted to help, only wanted to live quietly and care for her grandmother. And now, she was being condemned for the very kindness that had guided her every action. The villagers began to chant softly, a low murmur that grew louder and louder. "Cursed, cursed, cursed." Their voices blended into a single roar of fear. It was as if the ground itself shook beneath Sada's feet. She struggled against their grip, but it was like fighting the wind. Every movement was met with resistance. She stumbled forward, the edge of the well looming just ahead. Her eyes searched desperately for some sign, some miracle that could save her, but all she saw was stone, darkness, and the faces of people she had loved turned cruel by superstition. Bayo stepped closer, his shadow falling over Sod. His eyes were cold, but a flicker of doubt passed for just a moment before he hardened his expression again. "The spirits demand it," he shouted. "We must act now to save the village." His voice carried a strange finality. Sada's chest tightened. She understood in that moment that their fear had convinced them that they were doing the right thing. Logic, reason, truth, none of it mattered. Only fear ruled tonight. Sad tried one last plea. "Please? You don't understand. I can help the village. I can make everything better." Her voice cracked. Tears filled her eyes as the hands holding her dragged her closer to the edge of the well. She could hear Zola's cries beside her, the desperate voice of someone trying to save a friend from the impossible. But the villagers pushed forward, and with a final, terrifying shove, Sad felt herself lose balance. Her body tumbled over the edge. For a moment she felt as if the world had stopped. Air rushed past her face, and the square above seemed to vanish into nothing. Her heart raced faster than it ever had. Panic filled her mind. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the sudden darkness around her. The edges of the well blurred into blackness, and Sad felt herself falling faster and faster, as though the earth itself had opened its mouth to swallow her whole. The fall seemed endless. She could feel the cold air rushing past her, the rough stones of the well brushing against her arms. Her mind spun with fear and confusion. She had never imagined life could change so quickly, that the people she trusted could turn against her so completely. And yet, through the fear, a small spark of curiosity stirred. The walls of the well, wet and glistening, reflected something faintly glowing below. Sad blinked, trying to focus. The faint glow grew brighter as she fell. It was soft at first, like the light of fireflies, then stronger, like a hidden flame. Her fear battled with wonder. She had never seen anything like it. The water at the bottom of the well shimmered with a strange light, and for a moment she forgot her terror. She wondered what it could be. A secret, hidden for years, waiting to be discovered. A part of her heart leapt with hope. Perhaps this fall was not the end. Perhaps there was something else waiting for her down there, something she could use to survive. The water hit her suddenly, cold and deep, and she gasped, the shock stealing her breath. Her body sank, then floated slightly, and she realized that the glow was beneath the surface. Strange patterns of light danced across the water, illuminating shapes she could not yet understand. She kicked gently with her legs, trying to stay afloat and move toward the glow. The fear in her chest was still strong, but it was now mixed with curiosity. Something told her that this strange light held a secret, a power she had never imagined. Sada's mind raced as she adjusted to the cold water. Her body shivered, but she felt strangely alive. The villagers' faces, the shouts, the fear, they were now far above her. Here in the darkness she could breathe. She could think. And the glow beneath the water called to her, a quiet invitation she could not ignore. She moved carefully, reaching for it, and as her fingers brushed the shimmering light, a warmth spread through her hand, a feeling of life and possibility. For the first time since the day had begun, Sad felt a glimmer of hope. The villagers might have made a terrible mistake, but she was not powerless. The well, once a symbol of danger, now seemed to offer a secret, a hidden path to survival. She took a deep breath and prepared herself to explore, to understand, and to use whatever she had found to her advantage. Fear was still there, strong and raw, but curiosity and courage began to grow alongside it. Sada's thoughts turned briefly to Zola. She hoped her friend would be safe, that the villagers would not harm her for trying to help. The world above seemed distant now, almost unreal. Down here in the well, everything was quiet except for the soft sound of water and the strange glow beneath it. It was like stepping into another world, one that existed just below the surface of fear and misunderstanding. As Sad swam gently toward the light, she realized that this fall, terrifying as it had been, might be the beginning of something new. The villagers believed they had punished her, but they had not destroyed her. In the darkness, in the cold water, she found the first spark of hope, a small, glowing secret waiting for her to discover. And deep in her heart, she knew that this was only the start of a journey that could change everything, not just for her but for the village itself. Sad floated there for a moment, letting the water surround her, letting the glow guide her hands. The fear was still inside her, a sharp, biting companion, but it no longer had control. She had fallen into darkness, yes, but in that darkness she had found something else. Something that might save her, something that might reveal the truth, something that might one day make the villagers understand their terrible mistake. And in that moment, Saad made a promise to herself. No matter what lay ahead, she would survive. She would find the secret beneath the well, and she would use it to heal, to protect, and perhaps to teach the village a lesson they would never forget. The fall had been terrifying, but it had also shown her a new path, a path full of mystery, courage, and hope. Sada's head broke the surface of the water and she gasped for air. The cold water stung her skin, and the shock made her tremble, but the moment she looked around, all fear began to mix with wonder. She was not in the well anymore, not really. Below the water was a hidden chamber, like a secret world beneath the village. The walls shimmered softly with glowing crystals that reflected light in rainbow patterns across the rough stones. The water was shallow here, almost like a pool, and it carried her gently to a smooth rock where she could stand. Her heart raced as she looked around. Strange markings covered the walls, lines, shapes, and symbols she did not understand at first. They seemed alive, pulsing with a soft light, almost like they were watching her. Some of the symbols glowed brighter when she stepped closer, as if recognizing her presence. Saad felt a chill of excitement and fear all at once. She had never seen anything like this. She had always believed the stories of the well being special, but never had she imagined it hid something so incredible. Sada's mind flashed back to the village, to the fearful eyes of the villagers, to Bayo's angry shouts, and to the moment she had fallen. For a moment, the sadness and betrayal returned, heavy in her chest. But now, standing in this glowing chamber, a strange new feeling emerged: hope. Maybe this was not punishment. Maybe, somehow, this place had been waiting for her. Maybe it held the answers she needed, the truth about her abilities and the chance to save herself. She stepped carefully on the smooth rocks, her bare feet brushing against the cool surface. The water lapped gently around her ankles, soft and soothing. Her fingers touched one of the glowing crystals on the wall, and a warmth spread through her hand. A strange energy, like nothing she had ever felt, moved through her body. Her heart beat faster, but not from fear. This was excitement, curiosity, and a little bit of wonder. Saad knelt to examine the symbols on the walls more closely. They twisted and curved in ways she had never seen before, forming shapes that seemed to move when she looked at them. The markings were old, ancient, older than anyone in the village, older than the huts themselves. They spoke of power, protection, and healing. Saad reached out and touched the closest mark, and a sudden vision flashed through her mind. She saw the village, the crops, the goats, the storms. She saw herself gathering herbs, tending the sick, and walking through the forest. And she saw how all the misfortunes blamed on her had natural explanations. The storms were sudden weather patterns, the sick goats had eaten spoiled grass, and the failed crops were because of weak soil. Nothing she had done had caused harm. Saad sat back on the stone, letting the vision fade. A smile slowly formed on her lips. It was true. Everything she had done had been helpful, not harmful. The villagers' fear had twisted their understanding. They had seen only accidents and blamed her for them. But now she understood that she had a gift, a power that the villagers could not comprehend. She could heal. She could protect. She could understand the natural world and guide it in ways that would benefit everyone. If only they could trust her. She stood and walked slowly along the chamber, examining the crystals and symbols. Each one seemed to respond to her touch, glowing brighter when she approached. She ran her fingers along a long line of markings and felt knowledge flow into her mind. Not words, but understanding. The plants, the water, the earth itself, it all spoke to her. She could feel how to help the crops grow stronger, how to heal sick animals, and how to guide the villagers safely through the storms and dangers that had frightened them. Her heart swelled with determination. She would use this knowledge to protect her home, even if the villagers did not yet understand. The chamber seemed alive, and she realized that the well had not been a place of punishment. It had been a place of preparation, a secret hidden beneath the village for generations, waiting for someone like her, someone with kindness, courage, and a desire to help. The villagers had been wrong to push her into it, yes, but now she had the chance to prove her gift, to show them the truth, and to teach them that fear should never guide their actions. Saad knelt by a cluster of glowing crystals and touched the water that collected there. The surface rippled gently, and she saw images forming beneath it: the village, the forest, and the people she loved. She understood that the water acted like a mirror, showing the connections between life and nature, between people and the world around them. She could see where illnesses had begun, where plants were weak, and where the animals had suffered. Each problem had a cause that she now understood. And with her hands and knowledge, she could heal it all. A soft warmth spread through her chest. She had been frightened, yes. She had been betrayed. But she was alive and she had power. Saad stood taller, feeling a new strength rise inside her. She knew that the villagers had misunderstood her, that their fear had almost destroyed her. But she would not let that stop her. She would learn everything this chamber could teach her. She would understand her gift, and she would use it to save the village, even if it meant confronting those who had wronged her. Hours passed, though she did not notice. She studied the markings, touched the crystals, and let the knowledge flow into her. She learned how to prepare healing herbs in ways she had never known before. She discovered methods to cleanse the soil, strengthen the crops, and protect the animals from disease. The well had given her more than safety, it had given her purpose. Saad felt a quiet joy, knowing that she could make a difference. She also began to understand the deeper power within herself. It was not magic in the way the villagers might imagine, but it was real. Her gift came from her connection to the earth, to the plants, and to the living beings around her. She could feel the energy of the forest, the pulse of the water, and the life in the soil. She could guide it, nurture it, and use it to heal. This power had always been inside her, but the chamber had awakened it fully. Saad paused for a moment and looked at her reflection in the shallow water. Her eyes glowed softly in the light of the crystals. She saw fear there, yes, but also courage and determination. She whispered to herself, "I will help them. I will show them the truth. And they will understand." Her voice echoed softly in the chamber, and for a moment, it seemed as if the walls themselves nodded in agreement. A thought came to her: she would need a plan. The villagers had acted out of fear and superstition, and that fear would not disappear overnight. She could not simply return and expect them to welcome her. She would have to show them through action, through care and healing, that she was not a threat. And she could do it. With the knowledge she had gained, she could turn misunderstanding into trust. She could turn fear into hope. Saad explored further into the chamber. A narrow tunnel led away from the pool, lined with smaller crystals that glowed softly under her hands. The tunnel seemed to guide her, almost as if the well itself was leading her toward a purpose. She followed it carefully, feeling the water drip gently from the ceiling onto her skin, cooling and refreshing her. The tunnel opened into a larger room, where the crystals were even brighter and the markings more intricate. This room felt like the heart of the chamber. She knelt in the center, letting the energy flow into her, and for the first time she felt truly connected to something greater than herself. She thought of her grandmother and of Zola, of the goats and the crops, of the village as a whole. She realized that she could protect all of them if she learned to master her gift. The villagers had made a terrible mistake by throwing her into the well, but that mistake had brought her here. She could use it as a chance to change everything for the better. And Saad vowed silently that she would do just that. The chamber seemed to respond to her determination. The crystals glimmered more brightly, the markings pulsed with light, and the water around her rippled as if in approval. She felt a sense of peace for the first time since the villagers' accusation. The fear that had once gripped her heart was now tempered by purpose. She was not helpless. She was not powerless. She was strong, and her gift was real. As Saad prepared to leave the chamber and return to the village, she felt a strange calm. She had faced betrayal, fear, and danger, and she had survived. She had discovered a hidden world, a source of knowledge and power that had been waiting for her. And now she was ready to use it. The villagers might still doubt her, might still fear her, but she would not be stopped. She would heal, protect, and teach them the truth. Saad took one last look at the shimmering crystals and the ancient markings. They had revealed her gift, awakened her potential, and given her hope. She knew that she would return to the village with a new understanding, a new strength, and a new purpose. And when she did, the villagers would see that fear had blinded them, and that their cursed child was, in fact, the very person who could save them all. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, feeling the water guide her back toward the path that would lead to the surface. She did not know exactly how the villagers would react, but she was ready. She was ready to face them, ready to show her gift, and ready to transform misunderstanding into trust. Saad emerged from the water one last time, feeling renewed, determined, and full of hope. The fall into the well had led her to darkness, yes, but it had also led her to discovery. And now, with the chamber revealed and her gift awakened, Saad was prepared to change the village forever. The fear that had driven the villagers was strong, but the knowledge, courage, and kindness that flowed through Saad were stronger. She would not fail. Days passed slowly in the village of Lumbala. The sun rose and fell, casting golden light over clay huts and dusty paths, but the village seemed smaller somehow, quieter, as if it was holding its breath. Inside her small hut, Saad tended to her grandmother. The old woman's cough had lessened, and her tired eyes shone with relief, but Saad knew the real test was not only for her grandmother, it was for the village itself. Her time in the hidden chamber beneath the well had taught her much. She understood herbs, healing, and the balance of life in a way she never had before. Early one morning, Saad emerged from the back of her hut carrying a small bundle of herbs and remedies she had carefully prepared. The smell was strong and earthy, a mixture of roots, leaves and petals that she had learned could heal sickness and strengthen crops. She walked slowly through the village, keeping her head down at first, aware that the villagers might still fear her. The same eyes that had once accused her of curses now followed her cautiously, peeking from behind doors and windows. The first test came at the goat pen. Several goats had grown weak during the days of sickness, their small bodies shivering and their eyes dull. Villagers had been unable to help them, trying different remedies that had failed. Saad knelt beside the first goat, gently stroking its fur, and whispered softly to it. She sprinkled her herbal mixture over its food and rubbed the leaves onto its legs. Slowly the goat lifted its head, blinked and nuzzled her hand. The villagers who had gathered around gasped. Some muttered to each other, unable to believe their eyes. Is she really helping them? One woman whispered. Others nodded, their fear mingling with awe. Saad moved from goat to goat, applying her remedies, her hands guided by the knowledge she had gained in the secret chamber. The weak animals began to regain strength, their movements more lively, their eyes brighter. Saad did not shout or demand thanks. She worked quietly, letting her actions speak for themselves. Next she went to the fields. The crops had been battered by storms and left almost lifeless. Saad knelt in the soil, feeling its texture and moisture with her fingers. She applied herbal mixtures to the roots and sprinkled water infused with remedies she had learned to prepare. The plants shivered under her touch and slowly, almost magically, new green shoots began to appear. Villagers gathered at the edges of the fields, watching as she worked. Their murmurs were filled with surprise, then amazement. Some of them covered their mouths, afraid to speak, not fully understanding what they were seeing. Her grandmother watched from the doorway of their hut, her eyes shining with pride. "Saad, you are extraordinary," she whispered. "You have always had this gift. I only see it now in others." Saad smiled gently, feeling the warmth of her grandmother's approval. She understood that her power was not for glory, not for showing off, but for healing and protection. Every plant, every animal, every person she helped carried that lesson. The villagers began to step closer. Bayo the elder approached with slow, hesitant steps. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at the rejuvenated goats and the growing crops and felt a deep shame in his heart. He had been wrong. He had let fear and superstition guide him, and it had almost destroyed the village's greatest hope. Saad turned to face him, her expression calm but firm. She did not shout or scold. Instead, she showed him with her eyes that understanding was stronger than fear. One of the villagers, an older man named Kalu, stepped forward, bowing his head. "Saad, we were wrong," he said softly, his voice shaking. "We let fear control us and we accused you of things you did not do. Please, forgive us." Others followed, each speaking words of apology, their voices quiet, filled with remorse. But Saad only smiled gently, shaking her head. She had learned the lesson of patience and understanding in the secret chamber. Forgiveness could wait. Teaching them the value of trust and knowledge was more important than anger. Saad moved through the village, touching each hut lightly, offering remedies for ailments, guiding children to plants that could heal minor injuries, and showing villagers how to strengthen their fields. Some of them listened eagerly, while others remained hesitant, unsure if they could trust her completely. She did not push. Instead, she worked quietly, allowing the results of her actions to speak louder than words. Slowly, fear began to fade from the village, replaced by curiosity, respect, and hope. The story of what had happened at the well spread through the village. Some were ashamed, some were still fearful, but all began to understand that they had made a mistake. Saad had survived, and in surviving she had revealed a truth far greater than anyone had expected. She had shown that fear could blind people, but knowledge and understanding could heal not only the body but also the heart. That evening, Saad returned to the well to inspect it. She touched the water lightly, feeling the faint pulse of energy she had discovered in the chamber. The well was no longer a place of fear for her, it was a symbol of what lay beneath the surface of things. Hidden knowledge, hidden power, and hidden truths waiting to be discovered. She smiled softly, knowing that the villagers would one day learn this as well, if not through words, then through the actions and changes they had witnessed. Her grandmother joined her at the edge of the well. "You have done well, Saad," she said quietly. "Not just for the village but for yourself. You have learned to use your gift wisely. You are not just a healer, you are a guide. Saad nodded, feeling a deep sense of pride and calm. She had faced betrayal, fear and danger, and she had come out stronger. The well had been a trial and she had passed. The villagers slowly began to rebuild their trust in her. Some still whispered nervously, afraid that misfortune could return, but many began to ask for advice and guidance. Saad showed them how to care for their fields, their animals and their families. The village began to thrive again, stronger and healthier than before. They had learned a lesson that fear alone could destroy, but understanding and patience could save. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall trees, the villagers gathered in the square, not to accuse but to celebrate. They placed flowers near the well and spoke quietly of gratitude, hope and lessons learned. Saad stood at the edge, her eyes reflecting the golden light. She did not seek praise, but she felt a quiet satisfaction. The village had seen the truth. The power of kindness, knowledge and understanding had triumphed over fear. Children approached her, holding small bundles of herbs they had gathered themselves. Saad knelt among them, smiling, guiding their tiny hands and teaching them how to care for plants and animals. Laughter returned to the village, small at first, then growing as families worked together to rebuild what had been damaged. Fear had lost its grip, replaced by cooperation, trust and the promise of a better future. Bayo approached once more, older now in the eyes of Saada's gentle gaze. He bowed his head deeply. We feared and in our fear we did wrong, he admitted. But you have shown us the way. We are grateful, Saad. Truly. Saad nodded softly, acknowledging his words without bitterness. She knew that their understanding had come too late to prevent their mistakes, but it had come nonetheless. And that was enough. Saada's gift had changed the village. It had healed the sick, revived the crops and strengthened the animals. But more importantly, it had taught the people of Lumbala a lasting lesson, that understanding and patience were stronger than fear, and that judging others without knowing the truth could lead to pain and regret. The village remembered this lesson and in time, it became a part of their daily lives, a guiding principle in how they treated each other and the world around them. Even as days turned into weeks, Saad continued her work quietly. She did not boast of her abilities or demand respect. She simply worked, helping wherever she could, teaching the villagers to care for themselves and each other. Her grandmother watched with pride, and Zola remained by her side, offering support and friendship. Together they healed not just the village, but the hearts of the people who had once feared them. The well at the center of the village no longer inspired fear. Instead, it became a symbol of knowledge, of hidden truths, and of the power that could emerge when someone was brave enough to seek understanding. Saad had entered the well as a frightened girl accused of curses, but she emerged as a young woman with purpose, courage, and a gift to change the world around her. And so, the village of Lumbala learned to remember, fear is powerful, but it is not stronger than understanding. Misunderstanding can cause harm, but patience, knowledge, and kindness can heal. Saad had survived their fear, discovered her gift, and used it to teach a lesson that would last for generations. Saada's eyes softened as she looked across the village. Children played safely in the fields, goats ran freely, and the crops swayed gently in the wind. Villagers moved about their day with careful joy, aware now of the lesson they had learned. Saad smiled softly, knowing that even though they had been wrong, they had the chance to change. She had given them more than remedies and herbs, she had given them hope, trust, and understanding. As night fell, stars began to appear in the sky. Saad stood quietly, listening to the wind through the trees and the soft laughter of villagers below. She felt a deep peace within her. The fear that had once threatened to destroy her was gone, replaced by the quiet power of her gift, and the knowledge that she had the strength to guide, protect, and heal. The village would remember this day forever, not for the mistakes they had made, but for the courage and understanding that had risen above them. Saad turned toward her hut, her basket of herbs now empty, her heart full. She had faced the darkness of the well, the fear of the villagers, and the uncertainty of the unknown, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to guide her people. The village had learned their lesson too late, but the lesson had been learned nonetheless. From that day forward, Lumbala lived with a new understanding. Fear could no longer rule them, but kindness, patience, and knowledge could. Saad knelt to water the last of the newly sprouted plants near the well. She whispered softly to them as if speaking to the villagers themselves, "Grow strong. Learn from fear but trust in understanding. We are all stronger together." And with that, she stood, looked across her village, and knew that her journey was only beginning, but that she had already changed the lives of everyone around her. The village would never forget it.